Welcome to the Upside Journal Explainer. 2026 is the year enterprise AI moves from the sandbox into the stack. Today, we are breaking down the definitive playbook for agentic AI infrastructure and autonomous workflows. For CTOs, VPs of engineering, and enterprise architects, the stakes have literally never been clearer. We're moving way past the era of isolated experimentation, and we're entering a period where resilient, governable architecture is an absolute existential mandate.
So let's just jump straight into this architectural blueprint. We've mapped today's breakdown into 4 distinct phases. First, the pivot from pilots to production. Second, sovereignty and edge. Third, multi-agent orchestration. And finally, a very concrete 90-day CTO deployment playbook.
Right, moving into Act 1, the pivot, moving from pilots to production.
We have hit a massive inflection point, and enterprise leaders really have to start mandating production-ready systems now. To grasp the sheer scale of this pivot, just look at this number. By the end of this year, up to 40% of enterprise applications are going to embed task-specific AI agents. 40%! Think about that for a second, because just last year, we were sitting at less than 5%. This kind of acceleration proves that agentic systems aren't just a peripheral novelty anymore. They are your core infrastructure. Boardroom conversations have completely shifted away from the hype. It's entirely about operational ROI and resiliency now. If your architecture isn't built to support this volume natively, your operational velocity is going to completely stall out.
And honestly, it is a complete macro environmental shift. Back in 2025, we were all kind of stuck in the proof of concept sandbox. It was all about single agent silos, basic chatbots that couldn't really interact with your broader systems. But 2026, it is strictly about orchestration at scale. We are seeing elite enterprises out there running upwards of 1,000 agents in live production. These are high ROI, highly autonomous workflows that can actually reason, plan, delegate, and execute across your entire technological footprint.
Which brings us nicely to Act 2, sovereignty and edge. Basically, how to maintain control without compromise.
Now, as we scale these workflows up, relying solely on public cloud models becomes a massive vulnerability. We have to define the new standard, and that's sovereign AI. This means retaining absolute, uncompromising control over your data, your models, and your physical infrastructure. In 2026, especially if you're in a regulated industry or a global enterprise dealing with strict regional laws like GDPR in Europe or emerging African data regulations, sovereignty isn't a nice-to-have, it's a non-negotiable. You literally cannot allow critical autonomous decision-making to happen inside a black box public cloud where a sudden geopolitical shift or compliance failure could just instantly compromise your entire operation.
But executing this? Well, that requires sheer operational precision. Taking a look at this deployment checklist, if your requirement is data residency, your execution has to map perfectly to local compliance laws. For infrastructure, you've really got to evaluate hybrid sovereign clouds versus traditional on-premises setups. On the model side, you want to be prioritizing open-weight alternatives, think Mistral or Llama variants, to completely avoid vendor lock-in. And absolutely crucial here, for any cross-border operations, you must establish strict, immutable audit trails for every single action an agent takes.
But remember, sovereignty doesn't just mean building a massive localized data center. It extends all the way to the edge. Pushing lightweight models like Gemini Nano or Phi 2 to the edge is a foundational strategy for 2026. If you have IoT integrations or real-time field operations, you need low-latency, privacy-sensitive execution. You just can't afford the latency of a round trip to a centralized cloud when an agent has to make a real-time, physical-world decision on the fly.
Okay, moving on to Act 3, multi-agent orchestration, or moving from chaos to coordination.
So once you actually have that localized control locked down, the next huge hurdle is managing all these collaborating agents without descending into total systemic chaos. Despite the insane productivity gains available, we have to talk about the failure modes. Look at this reality. 60% of agentic AI projects remain completely blocked by governance and data gaps. Only 40% actually manage to scale. Why is that? Well, because when autonomous agents act on garbage data inputs, they don't just fail quietly. They create these massive cascading risks across your entire infrastructure. Uncontrolled agent sprawl is absolutely the biggest threat to enterprise AI right now, which emphasizes the extreme urgency of systemic governance.
So let's look at how this actually builds into a functional framework. To mitigate that sprawl, you need a highly robust orchestration layer.
Best practices dictate that you have to adopt a unified control plane for absolute visibility. You need to define strict delegation protocols and figure out exactly where your human-in-the-loop escalation points are. It's also time to leverage emerging protocols like MCP, the Model Context Protocol for tool access, and A2A for agent-to-agent communication. And finally, you absolutely must implement runtime observability. You have to monitor for what we call autonomy drift, basically making sure your agents don't deviate from their initial guardrails.
To really support that orchestration layer, we implement a 4-step actionable governance framework. Step 1, establish agent-ready data pipelines with real-time quality checks. Step 2, enforce strict role-based access and traceability for every autonomous decision. Step 3, build sovereign data factories for your most sensitive workloads to guarantee data never leaks. And Step 4, institutionalize regular red teaming. You have to stress test these governance guardrails by simulating failure modes long before you ever deploy them into live production.
All right, final section, Act 4, the playbook. Let's look at the 90-day CTO deployment timeline.
Let's take all this theoretical architecture and turn it into a concrete, tactical roadmap. Here is your precise 90-day execution timeline. In weeks 1 and 2, your mandate is to audit your existing AI usage and pinpoint those high-friction workflows. In weeks 3 through 6, you pilot just 2 or 3 multi-agent use cases heavily restricted by the governance guardrails we just discussed. Weeks 7 through 10 is the critical phase. This is where you scale the orchestration layer and integrate your edge and sovereign components. And finally, in weeks 11 and 12, you rigorously measure the operational ROI, refine the stack, and kick off the enterprise-wide rollout of your new hybrid human-agent workforce.
It's also really vital to look at the broader geographic opportunity here. For enterprises bridging operations across Africa, Europe, and North America, Agentic AI presents this incredible global flywheel. You have the opportunity to build sovereign stacks that deeply respect local data laws, while at the same time leveraging highly skilled diaspora talent networks for model fine-tuning and deployment expertise. It's just a brilliant alignment of cross-continent innovation and capital efficiency.
I want to leave you with this definitive thought. The infrastructure decisions made in 2026 will define competitive advantage for the decade. Building resilient, governable moats today isn't just a simple IT upgrade. It is an existential mandate for enterprise leadership. The leaders who invest in sovereign-capable, orchestratable agent stacks right now are the ones who will lead the autonomous era.
So the single question you must answer today is, what is your first workflow to agentify? Infrastructure decisions made today to find competitive advantage for the decade. If you are building autonomous stacks, subscribe to the Upside Journal on your preferred explainer platform. Review the full CTO deployment playbook at theupsidejournal.com. See you in the next Daily Drop.